Welcome to Evening Whispers of Love. Here is the story of Ida and what she has to overcome to find love in, well, a different kind of way. Sit back, relax, and get ready to hear about Ida's choice. Chapter 1: The Robbery. Sparks, Nevada had been built on the sound of iron, rails screaming beneath wheels, hammers ringing against steel, steam sighing like a tired animal at rest. But by the spring Ida Morel turned 20, even the trains seemed to arrive reluctantly, as though the town were something to be endured rather than served. The depot stood like a weary sentinel at the edge of town, its paint peeled thin by sun and grit. Fewer men waited there now. Fewer crates came off the cars. And fewer coins passed through the Morel mercantile, though Ida's father kept the shelves stocked as best he could, his pride refusing to bend even as his back did. "Take these to Mrs. Halvorson and the right place," her mother said, tying the twine tight around a parcel of flour and dried apples. "And don't linger." Ida smiled, slipping the parcels into her saddle bags. "I won't. I'll be back before the noon whistle." Her sister Delia leaned against the counter, dark curls falling into her eyes. At 16, Delia still carried the ease of someone who believed the world would make room for her. "Bring me something sweet if you pass the depot," she said, grinning. Ida laughed. "If there's anything left to bring." Her father only nodded from behind the counter, fingers counting ledger marks that never seemed to add up the way they once had. Outside, the wind kicked dust along the street, rattling the windows like a warning no one could quite hear. Ida mounted her horse and rode out past the edge of town, following the dirt road that curved toward the scattered homesteads beyond the tracks. The sky was a hard, endless blue, and for a brief while she let herself believe the day would pass quietly. She had just finished her last delivery when she heard it. Fast. Too fast. They came from the direction of Sparks, sharp, urgent thunder tearing across the plain. Ida turned in her saddle, heart tightening as 5 riders burst into view, dust trailing behind them like smoke from a gunshot. Their faces were half covered, hats pulled low, rifles slung easy across their backs. They didn't slow. They rode straight through. Ida urged her horse forward, a chill crawling up her spine. Something was wrong. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy, like the moment before lightning strikes. She crested the rise overlooking the town just as the sound reached her. Gunfire. The crack of it shattered the quiet, echoing off the depot walls. A scream followed, short, cut off too quickly. Ida's breath caught in her throat as she kicked her horse into a full gallop. The town came apart before her eyes. The mercantile doors hung open, one hinge blown clean away. Glass littered the street, glittering cruelly in the sun. Smoke curled upward from somewhere near the depot, and a horse lay screaming in the dirt, one leg twisted wrong beneath it. Ida slid from the saddle before her horse had fully stopped. "Ma." Her voice broke the word in half. "Pa." She ran. Her father lay just inside the doorway, his ledger still clutched in one hand, blood darkening the dust beneath him. Her mother was near the counter, eyes open, staring at nothing, a single shot through her chest. Ida dropped to her knees beside her, hands shaking as she pressed them uselessly against the wound. "No," she whispered. "No, no." Delia was behind the counter. Ida found her last. Her sister's hand was stretched toward the fallen cash box, fingers curled as though she had tried to protect something, or someone. Ida screamed then, the sound tearing out of her like something alive, something feral. Outside, the sheriff lay face down in the street, his star dulled with blood. The office door across from him stood open, papers drifting out like pale birds. The riders were gone. Only silence remained. Ida sat in the dirt as the sun climbed higher, her grief settling into her bones like lead. Sparks, Nevada, Train City working town home, had been hollowed out in less than an hour. And as she rose at last, wiping blood and dust from her hands, something colder than grief took hold. The world had taken everything from her. Chapter 2: William. William had told himself it was just a job. That was how Darrell had said it the night before, leaning back in his saddle, bandana already knotted loose at his throat like it belonged there. In and out. Take the money, take the goods. No one gets hurt. The kind of promise men made when they were already past the point of believing it. Sparks looked smaller than William expected as they rode in, thin streets, tired buildings, a town clinging to the railroad as if the tracks were the only thing keeping it breathing. William pulled his bandana up over his mouth and nose, the cloth tasting of dust and sweat. He didn't like towns like this. They had a look about them, like a man who'd been knocked down too many times and didn't know whether to get back up or stay there. William didn't want to be there at all, but his brother Darrell had implored him to go with them. Jimmy and Walker dismounted fast, rifles loose in their hands. William stayed mounted, watching the street, fingers tight around the reins. The mercantile door stood open, a bell jangling nervously in the frame. Voices rose inside. A man's, angry, protective. A woman's, sharp with fear. Then the first shot split the air. William stiffened. What the? Another shot. Then another. Jimmy burst back into the street, bandana dark against his grin, gun smoking like it was proud of itself. Sheriff tried to stop us, he said, laughing. Bad idea. William stared at him. That wasn't the plan. Jimmy shrugged. Plan changed. Darrell swore, yanking his own bandana higher as if that might hide what they'd done. Walker wouldn't look anywhere but the ground. William glanced into the mercantile once, just once, and wished he hadn't. Bodies didn't look real when they were still. They looked like something left behind. Something unfinished. Take what you can and get moving, Jimmy snapped. Now. William grabbed nothing. They didn't linger. Shouts were already carrying down the street, doors opening, fear spreading faster than fire. William kicked his horse forward, forcing himself not to look back as they cleared the edge of town. They were almost free when he saw her. A rider coming fast from the far road, dust streaming behind her. She slowed when she spotted them, hand tightening on the reins. Her face was partly shadowed by her hat, but her eyes were clear, sharp, searching. William's horse slowed without him meaning it to. She couldn't see his face. None of them could be seen clearly. Bandanas hid their mouths, hats pulled low. Just shapes. Just men on horses. Still she looked straight at him. There was no fear in her yet, only confusion, then something deeper, like understanding taking shape too quickly. Sunlight caught loose strands of her hair, and the wind lifted her coat as if she were already bracing for what lay ahead. William felt it then, hard and sudden, a wrench in his chest he didn't have a name for. Ride, he told himself. Don't be a fool. For one stretched moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. No names. No faces. Just two riders passing on a dirt road, one running from what he'd done, the other riding straight toward it. Darrell swore sharply. William, move. William tore his eyes away and kicked his horse forward. The sound of hooves swallowed the moment whole, dust rising to erase her from sight. She would never know which of them he was. Would never know his name. But as Sparks disappeared behind them, William knew something he couldn't shake. He was connected to Sparks now forever. Chapter 3, The Cabin. They holed up in the old cabin by dusk, the one sunk low into the trees where the ground stayed damp even in summer. It had been abandoned long enough that the door sagged open and moss crawled up the logs like it was trying to claim the place for good. September light slanted thin through the pines. Cold came early this high, and the smell of winter already rode the air. No one spoke at first. Jimmy broke the silence, tossing the saddlebags onto the dirt floor. Coins spilled out, dull and unimpressive for the blood they'd cost. Could have been worse, he said. Town didn't have much. William's jaw tightened. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, bandana pulled down now but still clenched in his fist like he might tear it apart. You killed them, he said flatly. All of them. Jimmy looked up, eyes hard. They were in the way. That wasn't the deal. Darrell stepped in quickly. Enough. We're all breathing, aren't we? That's what matters. William pushed off the wall. You shot a family. And the sheriff. Silence again, thicker this time. Walker shifted his weight, boots scraping dirt. We can't stay together after this, he muttered. Every badge from here to Reno's gonna be sniffing around. Jimmy nodded once. We lay low. Split up. Meet back in the spring. In the spring, Darrell repeated. When things cool. They divided the money on the floor, rough piles made with unsteady hands. When Darrell nudged a share toward William, he didn't move. I don't want it. Jimmy laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Don't be righteous now. William didn't look at him. I won't take blood money. Darrell frowned. Well, listen to yourself. What's done is done. Taking it doesn't change that. William met his brother's eyes then, something unmovable set behind his own. Neither does pretending it's okay. He stood, slung his bedroll over his shoulder and headed for the door. Where you going? Walker asked. Doesn't matter. They didn't stop him. Outside, the air was colder still, the sky bruised purple at the edges. William mounted up without looking back, the cabin already feeling like a grave he was lucky to escape. After he was gone, Jimmy spat into the dirt. You think he's gonna be a problem? Darrell's voice was tight. No. He won't talk. You sure? "He's my brother," Darrell said. "And he's got his own kind of honor. He'll disappear before he opens his mouth." Jimmy watched the door a long moment, then turned away. William rode hard until the trees thinned and the land opened up, his breath fogging in the cooling night. He knew exactly where he was going. He'd known the moment he saw her on the road, before he understood why. By the time the lights of Sparks appeared ahead, faint and tired against the dark, his resolve had settled into something steady. He told himself he was riding in for work. Men always were. But as he passed beneath the quiet stars and into the edges of the town he'd helped ruin, William knew the truth as clearly as he felt the reins in his hands. He was looking for the girl who rode back too late. And he meant to find her. Chapter 4, Black Cloth and Iron. William rode into Sparks beneath the sound of bells. They tolled slow and heavy, rolling across the town and settling into his chest like stones. He reined in at the edge of the street, dust clinging to his boots, and followed the sound to the small rise near the churchyard. Black gathered there. Men with hats in their hands. Women holding tight to one another. Four coffins stood in a row, simple, unfinished, wood that spoke of haste and lack. One smaller than the others. William stayed mounted, farther back than the rest, an outsider among the living. Then he saw her. She stood near the front, dressed in black that swallowed the light, her shoulders trembling despite how straight she held herself. Her hair was pinned back, her face pale and streaked with tears she made no effort to hide. When the preacher spoke the names of the dead, the Cordell family, the sheriff, something in her gave way, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to hold herself together. William's breath caught. He didn't know her name. Didn't know her place in this town. But grief marked her as surely as blood marked the ground he'd left behind days earlier. He looked away, shame tightening his jaw, and urged his horse onward before he could think better of it. The livery sat quiet, the attendant leaning against the rail, hat pulled low. "Afternoon," the man said. "You passing through?" "For now," William answered, swinging down. "Looking for work." The attendant nodded toward the churchyard. "Picked a bad day to arrive. Town's been hit hard. Robbery. Murder. Sheriff included." William swallowed. "I heard bells. Happened fast," the man continued. "No faces. Riders wore bandanas. Gone before anyone could stop him." William forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Name's William. Came in from California." The man stuck out a hand. "Lawrence." They shook. Lawrence looked him over once more, then gestured down the street. "Blacksmith short-handed. Name's Jack. Might give you a chance." William thanked him and walked on, every step feeling heavier than the last. The blacksmith's forge breathed heat into the cooling air. Jack was thick through the shoulders, beard shot with gray, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You ever worked iron?" Jack asked plainly. "No," William said. "But I learned fast. I work hard." Jack studied him a long moment, gaze flicking to the funeral bells still echoing faintly in the distance. "This town's been through a lot," he said finally. "I don't need trouble." "I won't be any," William replied. And he meant it. Jack exhaled. "Against my better judgment," he said, "I'll give you a try. You keep your head down. You listen. You keep to yourself." William nodded. "I understand." The funeral was ending as William stepped back into the street. People began to drift away in small, broken groups. He turned to leave, and saw her again. She walked slowly, flanked by neighbors, eyes cast downward, black dress brushing the dust. When she looked up, just briefly, their gazes met. It was nothing. And it was everything. No recognition. No accusation. Just two strangers, one marked by grief, the other by guilt, standing in the same ruined town. Then she looked away and kept walking. William stood there long after she'd passed, the bells finally falling silent. Sparks, Nevada, had taken him in without knowing who he was. And somewhere between iron and earth and black cloth, William realized he was exactly where he was meant to be, whether he deserved it or not. Chapter 5, Room and Board. The rooming house sat just off the main street, its white paint yellowed by time and sun, lace curtains fluttering in the open windows like it was forever mid-sigh. William paused at the door, listening to the muffled clatter inside. Laughter, dishes, life continuing. He knocked once. The door swung open immediately. "Well," the woman inside declared, eyes lighting up. "Aren't you a sight?" She was plump and cheerful, hair piled into a careful gray bun, cheeks pink as if they'd never known worry. Her dress was neat, her apron spotless. She looked William up and down without shame and smiled wider. You must be new, she said. I know everyone and I certainly don't know you. Yes, ma'am, William said, removing his hat. Name's William. I'm looking for a room. Well, you've come to the right place. She stepped aside, already ushering him in. Mrs. Rayner. Call me Edith if you like, everyone does. Young men drifting in and out, that's how this town survives, you know. Especially now. The house smelled of soap and stew. A clock ticked loudly in the hall, steady and reliable. Mrs. Rayner showed him a small room upstairs, clean bed, narrow desk, a wash basin already filled. $2 a week, she said. Supper included if you don't mind eating with the rest of us. I don't mind at all. She beamed. Good. I do hate quiet. As he set his things down, William felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief exactly, but the dangerous comfort of pretending he belonged. He washed up, the cool water grounding him, and caught his reflection in the small mirror. 22, lean from hard travel, hair still dusty from the road. Young enough to be forgiven for many things. Old enough to know better. California wasn't a lie. He had come from there, just not straight here. After his parents passed, everything had unraveled quickly. Darryl, only 25 now, had stepped into the space left behind, shouldering responsibility with hands that weren't meant for it. William had followed him because there had been nowhere else to go. Ruth would have known what to do. Their sister had died years earlier, taken by the fever in a single terrible week. William still remembered the way Darryl had held her hand long after it went cold, jaw set like grief was something he could outlast. That was when things began to change. Downstairs, Mrs. Rayner called up. You settling in all right, dear? Yes, ma'am. Good. Now don't be shy, go get yourself some supper. Diner's still open. William grabbed his coat and stepped back into the street. Evening had softened sparks, lamplight warming the edges of buildings, the day's sorrow easing into something quieter. He headed toward the diner, stomach tight with hunger and nerves both. He told himself it was just food he wanted. But as he walked, his eyes drifted, toward the mercantile, toward the street where black dresses had passed earlier, toward the space where grief still lingered like smoke. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story. But sparks felt smaller now, closer, and William had the uneasy sense that supper was only the beginning of his stay. Chapter 6, Supper. The diner was narrow and warm, the smell of grease and coffee settling heavy in the air. A bell jingled as William stepped inside, and for a moment every sound seemed too loud, the scrape of chairs, low conversation, the hiss of the griddle. He slid into an empty stool near the end of the counter. What'll it be? The woman behind the counter asked, already reaching for a mug. Whatever's hot, William said. She nodded as if that answer told her everything she needed to know. William kept his eyes down at first, listening more than looking. This was how he survived, by noticing without being noticed. Talk was subdued, sentences unfinished. No one laughed. Forks paused mid-air when the door opened, then resumed once it closed again. Then she came in. Ida wore the same black dress from the funeral, though now it was brushed clean, the fabric softened by lamplight instead of grief. She moved carefully like someone still learning how to take up space again. A woman touched her arm as she passed, murmured something too quiet to hear. Ida nodded, offered a small, tight smile. William's chest tightened. She took a table near the window, sitting alone. Her hands folded in her lap, then unfolded again, restless. She stared at the tabletop as if it might give her instructions. William told himself to look away. He didn't. Jack came in a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag, shoulders filling the doorway. He took the seat beside William and ordered without looking at the menu. As he waited, his gaze drifted, not to the counter, not to the door, but across the room. Toward her. William noticed it instantly. Jack didn't stare outright. He didn't need to. His eyes lingered just long enough to be intentional, then flicked away. When Ida shifted in her seat, Jack's posture changed too, like iron responding to heat. Something in William went cold. He didn't know why it bothered him. Jack hadn't done anything wrong. The man was local. Established. He had a place here. William had nothing but a borrowed name and a rented bed. Still the unease stayed. Jack caught him watching and frowned. You eat enough today? He asked. Enough, William said. Jack nodded, then glanced back toward Ida again, this time more openly. Towns had it rough, he muttered. Some folks more than others. William followed his gaze, careful to keep his voice even. You know her? Jack hesitated. Everyone knows everyone more or less. That was all he said. Ida stood to leave a moment later. She placed coins on the table, paused as if remembering something she'd forgotten, then straightened and headed for the door. As she passed the counter, her eyes lifted, and found William's. Just for a second. There was no recognition. Only that same searching look, like she was measuring the shape of the world and finding it altered. William looked away first this time. When the door closed behind her, the diner seemed to exhale. Jack watched the space she'd left behind a beat too long, then turned back to his plate. "You start early tomorrow?" he said. "Sun up." "Yes, sir." William finished his meal without tasting it. As he stepped back into the cooling night, he caught sight of Ida halfway down the street, black dress fading into shadow. He told himself it didn't matter. But the unease followed him all the way back to the rooming house, settling in his chest like something unfinished, like iron left too long in the fire. Chapter 7: Heat and Iron. The forge woke before the sun. William learned that quickly. Jack was already there when he arrived, fire banked low, sleeves rolled, the rhythm of work set before a word was spoken. The heat pressed close even in the early chill, and by the time the sky began to lighten, sweat darkened William's collar and dust clung to his skin like a second layer. "Again?" Jack said, handing him the hammer. William took it without complaint. The work was brutal in its simplicity: lift, strike, turn, repeat. His arms burned, his hands blistered, but he didn't slow. Pain was honest. It asked nothing except that you endure it. Jack watched him carefully. Not with kindness. Not with cruelty. With the same measured attention he gave iron, as though William were something being tested for flaws. "Where'd you say you learned to work like that?" Jack asked finally. "I didn't," William replied, breath steady despite the strain. "Just learned how not to quit." Jack grunted, which William took as approval. By midday, sparks stirred more fully. Wagons passed. Voices carried. The forge became part of the town's pulse again, the ringing of iron threading itself into the air. That was when Ida appeared. William noticed her before he meant to. She walked down the street with purpose now, shoulders squared, hair pinned tight. The black dress was gone, replaced with muted brown, practical and plain. She carried a ledger beneath one arm. She slowed as she passed the forge. William's hammer missed its mark by a fraction. Jack noticed immediately. "Careful," he said sharp. William nodded and corrected, but his eyes flicked up despite himself. Ida stood just beyond the open doors, sunlight at her back. She hesitated, then stepped inside. "I need hinges," she said quietly. "For the back door." Jack wiped his hands and straightened, his voice changing, softening in a way William hadn't heard yet. "I can have them by tomorrow." She nodded. "Thank you." Jack lingered a moment longer than necessary. "You shouldn't be handling things alone so soon." Ida's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. "They won't handle themselves." Jack studied her, something unreadable crossing his face. "Still, if you need help, I'll manage." She turned then and saw William. Not as a passing stranger this time, but as a presence within her space. For a breath, the forge went quiet in William's mind, the world narrowing to the look in her eyes. Recognition flickered, not of him but of familiarity. As though she knew him without knowing why. William inclined his head slightly, respectful, distant. Ida returned the gesture, polite and reserved, then left without another word. Jack watched her go, his expression tightening. "You keep your eyes on your work," he said, not looking at William. William picked up the hammer again. "I am." But the echo of her presence stayed long after the forge door swung shut. As the afternoon wore on, William understood something with unsettling clarity. Whatever Ida Morel carried with her, it was heavy. And Jack knew it. William still did not. Yet. Chapter 8: The Name on the Door. Ida had barely disappeared down the street when Lawrence ambled up to the forge, a bundle of worn horseshoes slung over his shoulder. He leaned against the doorframe like a man with nowhere urgent to be. "Mornin', Jack," he said. "Need these reset by tomorrow." Jack took the bundle with a grunt. "I'll see to it." Lawrence didn't leave. He shifted his weight, eyes drifting, too casually, toward the street Ida had gone down. "Funeral's hardly over and she's already back to business," he said. "Strong girl." Jack's jaw tightened just a fraction. "You ever going to ask her out?" Lawrence went on, lowering his voice though there was no real effort in it. "Everyone knows you've had an eye on her for years." William's hammer slowed. Jack snorted. "Ask her out." He shook his head. "No sense in wasting time courting. She needs stability. A husband. I'll propose soon enough." William's grip tightened on the handle. Lawrence raised his brows. Soon, huh? As soon as things settle, Jack said. Town needs order right now. William looked up then, unable to stop himself. Jack caught the glance immediately. His face darkened, not angry exactly but embarrassed, exposed. That's enough standing around, he said sharply. William, go see if that box I've been waiting on came in. Mercantile should have it. William nodded at once. Yes, sir. He set the hammer down and wiped his hands on his trousers, glad for the excuse to put distance between himself and the forge. As he stepped back into the street, the late morning sun felt harsher than before. The mercantile stood quiet, its windows newly cleaned, its door freshly rehung. William hesitated on the threshold, an unease settling deep in his chest. He pushed the door open. The bell rang. Soft. Familiar. Ida stood behind the counter. Not as a passerby. Not as a woman in black at a graveside. But as the keeper of the place itself, ledger open, pen poised, shoulders squared with purpose that now made terrible sense. She looked up. Can I help you? William froze. The room seemed to tilt, memory crashing into place all at once. The shattered doorway, the ledger in a dead man's hand, the smaller coffin. The weight of Lawrence's words. The mercantile. The family. This was her. The girl on the road. The woman in black. The survivor. William's mouth opened. Closed again. His voice failed him. Ida watched him carefully now, head tilting just slightly. Are you all right? The name on the door beside him caught his eye, painted careful and proud. Morel Mercantile. William swallowed hard. Yes, he managed at last. Oh, I'm here for Jack. He asked about a box. Ida nodded, stepping back toward the storeroom. I'll check. As she turned away, William stood rooted to the floor, the full weight of what he had done, and where he now stood, settling over him like iron fresh from the fire. He had ridden into Sparks to look for work. But he had found her. And now there was no unknowing left to hide behind. Chapter 9, Crossing Paths. William had been staring at the box for longer than he should have, trying to figure out how to carry it without making a fool of himself. The moment Ida appeared in the doorway, calm and efficient, all the air in the room seemed to shift. She held the box lightly in her hands. Here, she said, stepping toward him. This is for Jack. He reached for it, but his foot caught the edge of the counter and he stumbled. Ida reacted instantly, stepping close and catching him by the arm. Her hands were warm, strong, firm. Careful, she murmured, steadying him. He straightened, cheeks heating. Thanks. I'm not usually this clumsy. She gave a small smile, one he noticed but couldn't read fully. You're new here, aren't you? She asked casually, though there was a hint of curiosity in her voice. Yes, he said. Just got in from California. He hesitated. Looking for work. She nodded, glancing at the box he still held. Well, I hope it goes well. He managed a small smile. Thank you. It will, I think. They lingered just a heartbeat too long, and he felt the pull of her presence, something he couldn't name and wouldn't yet admit. The moment broke when Mrs. Rayner bustled in from the stairwell, cheeks flushed and apron dusted with flour. Well, what's this? New man and the pretty Miss Morel talking? Ida stiffened slightly. William cursed inwardly. Just the box, he said, turning quickly. Yes, ma'am, Ida said, a polite smile fixed in place, and Mrs. Rayner bustled off down the street, humming. William carried the box back to Jack, feeling the warmth of embarrassment in his chest. He handed it over silently, and Jack gave him a nod. No questions asked. That night, Sparks felt quieter than ever, the streets washed in soft lamplight. William sat at the diner, a plate of food untouched in front of him, his eyes unconsciously drawn to a table near the window. Ida sat there, surrounded by a small group of women from the town, laughing quietly at some shared joke. The warmth of her presence seemed to fill the room. She didn't notice him, at least not yet, but he didn't want to look away. Jack slid onto the stool beside him, his usual blunt tone softened by the night. Quiet crowd tonight, he said, nodding toward Ida. She's been through a lot. Hard to blame her for laughing when she can. William's eyes didn't leave her. Yeah, he murmured. She seems strong. Jack's gaze followed his. She is strong enough for this town. He paused, then added, keep your distance for now. Learn the ropes. That's your place. Yes, sir, William said, knowing he had no intention of breaking the rule, but also knowing he would remember every movement she made. As William left the diner, he noticed Ida standing just outside. She had finished with the women and was adjusting the scarf around her neck. William, she called softly. He froze, then approached. Miss Morel, he said, cautious. You're walking my way? She asked, and he nodded. Mind if I join you? They moved down the empty streets together, the night cool and quiet around them. She began, voice low. I should tell you about my family. William listened, hands loosely at his sides. My parents, and my sister Delia, she said, voice faltering slightly. They were taken from me. The sheriff too. It was all at once. She swallowed. It's why I'm here, keeping the store running. Why I have to be strong, I guess. William nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. I understand, he said gently. I can't imagine. I'm sorry. She looked at him, something unreadable flickering across her features. Relief, perhaps, that someone could hear, or perhaps something else entirely. They reached the Mercantile. The street was empty, the lamplight pooling in soft circles. This is me, she said, stopping at the steps. Above the store. Thank you for walking me, she said. Of course, William replied softly. I'm glad I did. She gave a small, fleeting smile, then climbed the steps. William lingered a moment, watching the door close behind her. He turned back toward his room, the streets empty and quiet, but the memory of her presence with him all the way home. And for the first time, William realized that being here, in Sparks, near her, was no longer just about work. It was something else entirely. Chapter 10, Winter Looms. The chill of early October had begun to creep into Sparks. Frost edged the rail ties in the morning, and townsfolk hurried to finish repairs, stock firewood, and prepare for the long months ahead. William had become a fixture at the forge. Jack often muttered about his surprising skill, the way his young hands adapted quickly to iron, never slowing, never complaining. Even Jack couldn't deny William's work ethic, though he still kept his eyes on him. Ida had stopped by more than once, usually with small requests for ironwork for the Mercantile, or to ask a question about a hinge or latch. Their conversations were short, polite, safe, never lingering. Still, each exchange left William's chest tight, a mix of longing and guilt he couldn't name aloud. That morning Jack called him over. You're doing well, William, Jack said, wiping his hands on a rag. Better than I expected. You've got a knack for this work. Thank you, sir, William said, careful to keep his tone even. Jack leaned against the anvil, eyes sharp. I'm taking Ida out to supper at the diner later this week, he said plainly. Then I plan to propose. Don't see any reason to waste time with courting. William froze mid-motion, hammer hovering. A supper? Jack nodded. Yes. She's a good woman, William. I've had my eye on her a long time. William's jaw tightened. Yes, sir, he said, voice low. Jack watched him closely. I see it in you, boy. You like her. William looked away, face hot, hands gripping the hammer like it might keep his thoughts steady. Jack shrugged. Fine. Just remember your place. Focus on the work, not on her. Sparks is small, people notice. Before William could respond, the door slammed open. 4 riders burst in, boots heavy on the wooden floor. One of them carried a bundle of papers. Wanted posters, the rider called. Bank robbery east of here, Jimmy Bergen and Walker Flynn. Bring him in if you see him. The posters were nailed roughly to the wall. William froze. His stomach dropped as he saw the faces staring back at him. The smirks, the eyes, the unmistakable stances of his former companions. Jack squinted at the images. Bank robbery? That was months ago, east of here? William's throat tightened. Jimmy Bergen? Walker Flynn? He muttered under his breath, recognition hitting him like a blow. They're wanted, the rider repeated. Dead or alive. Heads will pay. William stepped back, hands shaking despite his effort to remain calm. Sparks. Ida. The town he had begun to care for. And the men he had ridden with, now posters on a wall, wanted for murder and robbery. Jack glanced at him sharply. You all right, boy? William nodded, though barely. His mind raced. The guilt, desire, and sudden fear collided, leaving him breathless. He had come to Sparks for a fresh start, to see her again, to make a life. But now the past had arrived on the walls of the forge. Chapter 11, The Creek. William arrived at the diner just as the evening's light was fading, the room warm and bustling. He paused at the door and his stomach tightened. Jack and Ida sat together in a corner booth. Jack's grin stretched wide, teeth bright in the lamplight. Ida, in her simple brown dress, sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap. There was a polite smile on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. William stepped up to the counter and took a stool, trying not to stare too obviously. The waitress, wiping a plate, leaned down to a woman seated nearby. "You see Jack and Ida together?" she said softly. "I think they'd make such a cute pair. Ever since his girl left him, Jack's been lonely. Poor man." The other woman nodded. 12 years his senior, she said. "Not that it matters a bit. Sparks could use some happy couples." William's stomach churned. He couldn't finish his meal. Every bite felt heavy, every word around him distant. He dropped some coins on the counter and left without a word, stepping back into the cold night air. He wandered the quiet streets, unsure where to go, until he found himself at the creek behind the church. Moonlight danced across the water, reflecting the skeletal branches of trees and the faint outlines of gravestones. Ida was already there, standing on the bank, coat pulled tightly around her shoulders. "William," she said softly, surprise flickering in her eyes. He nodded, offering a tentative smile. "Miss Morel." She moved closer. "I didn't expect anyone tonight. I needed some air," he said, voice low. "Away from people." They walked along the bank in silence for a moment, the creek burbling softly beside them. Finally, William stopped and looked at her, expression hesitant. "I should tell you something," he said. I lost my parents and my sister years ago. And I only have my brother Darryl left." Ida's face softened. Her hand brushed the air as if reaching for comfort, though she didn't touch him. I understand," she said quietly, voice gentle. Her own grief, still raw from her family, made her heart ache for him. William exhaled. "I didn't mean to burden you." "You don't," she said. And she leaned closer. Her lips brushed his in a quick, hesitant kiss. William felt the warmth, the spark, but also the pull of his guilt. He returned the kiss briefly, then stepped back, chest tight. "You should get home," he said, though his voice was thick with conflicting emotion. She nodded, her own face illuminated by the moonlight. "Thank you for walking with me." He accompanied her back to the mercantile. She climbed the steps to the apartment above, and William lingered on the street for a moment, watching the door close behind her. The night felt colder now, the warmth of her presence replaced by the weight of his thoughts. On the walk back to the rooming house, he ran his hands through his hair. The guilt pressed at him like iron. Sparks had begun to feel like a home. He liked her. He wanted her. But he carried too many secrets, too many ghosts. And as he climbed the stairs to his own room, he knew the hardest part was yet to come. Figuring out whether he could ever belong here and whether he could ever belong to her. Chapter 12, Blue at the Social. The church hall was alive with chatter, laughter, and the squeak of wooden floors beneath boots. Tables lined with pies, jugs of cider, and plates of freshly baked bread filled the room with the scent of sugar and spice. William arrived early, hoping to blend in, though he never quite managed it. Sparks folk all knew each other. Outsiders, no matter how quiet, were noticed. Then he saw her. Ida. In a soft blue dress that shimmered slightly in the lamplight. The color brought out the warmth in her eyes, the slight curve of her shoulders, and the graceful way she moved through the crowd. Jack was already there, trailing her with a grin too wide and hands too quick to linger on her shoulders, brushing her hair back with overfamiliar ease. William felt the tight coil of anger in his chest. He stepped outside for fresh air, hoping the night sky could cool the heat of his emotions. He leaned against the church wall, letting the cold bite at his cheeks, when a sudden quiet drew his attention. He ducked behind a tree and peeked around the trunk. Ida and Jack emerged from the hall, walking toward the edge of the field. William held his breath. Jack stopped, took both of her hands in his and knelt. "Ida," he said, voice steady, "I've admired you for years. I've cared for you more than anyone in this town could know. Will you marry me?" Ida's eyes widened, and her hands squeezed his gently. "Oh, Jack," she said softly, I could never. I care for you, I do, but I think of you as a father figure, not a husband." Jack's face fell. Hurt but not complete despair. He stood slowly, letting go of her hands. "In time," he said, voice tight, "you'll see that you could grow to love me as I love you. You'll understand someday." He turned and walked back toward the church hall, boots heavy on the grass. Ida sank to the edge of the steps, head in her hands, trembling slightly. William stepped out from behind the tree, moving toward her cautiously. "Ida," he said softly, voice careful not to startle her. She looked up, her eyes shining with tears, cheeks glistening in the lamplight. "William," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "It's all right," he said. "You don't have to be brave all at once. Let it out." Her hands touched his arms briefly, and she leaned slightly against him. The blue dress, the tears, the quiet vulnerability of her, it struck him harder than anything he'd felt before. I thought I should say yes, she admitted softly. I didn't want to hurt him. But I can't. William nodded. You don't owe anyone a choice but your own. She exhaled slowly, leaning back just enough to meet his eyes. Thank you, she said, for being here. He gave her a small, careful smile. Always, he said. The night was still, the distant chatter of the social muted by distance. Sparks, with all its noise and history, faded into the dark around them, leaving only the quiet and the warmth of the moment between them. William felt the pull of guilt immediately afterward, the memory of the past, of what he had done, of who he had been, but he let it wait. Right now Ida needed him. And he would be there no matter what. Chapter 13, Confessions Brewing. The morning air in Sparks was crisp, carrying the faint tang of wood smoke and frost. The forge was alive with the clanging of iron, but the rhythm felt off to William. Jack's movements were sloppy, distracted, and impatient. He dropped a hammer, cursed under his breath, then muttered about Ida again. William's stomach tightened. He had seen this before, Jack's obsession, but now, after the proposal and rejection, it had infected the rhythm of their work. Sparks was small, news traveled fast, and already whispers filled the air. Ida, they said, was still mourning. In time they assumed she would come around. William tried to focus on his own work, hammer striking iron in steady beats, but his thoughts drifted. Ida. Gossip. His guilt. The bell over the door jingled and William looked up. A tall man in the uniform of a neighboring town's sheriff entered. His hat was dusted with frost, boots heavy from the road. Morning, the sheriff said, voice firm. Name's Collins. I've come with news about the bank robbery east of here. We've apprehended Walker Flynn, one of the men involved. There may be 2 others still at large. Thought Sparks might want to know in case they come this way. William froze mid-swing. His hands clenched around the hammer. He knew exactly who those 2 might be, Jimmy Bergen and the others from that fateful night. Jack turned sharply, interest piqued despite his distracted mood. Walker Flynn? He asked. Arrested, the sheriff replied. Should be held for trial soon. But the other men, still out there. And if I'm honest, he added, voice dropping low, we believe Walker Flynn, Jimmy Bergen, and the rest of their gang are probably responsible for the murders at the Morel Mercantile, the family and the sheriff. Same kind of violence, same pattern. Sparks should be careful. William's chest tightened. The hammer felt heavy in his hands. Sparks. Ida. The town he had begun to care for. And now the men he had ridden with, the ones who had destroyed her world, were officially wanted for murder and robbery, and the law suspected them of what William already knew to be true. Jack returned to his work with a grunt, distracted, hitting the iron with uneven blows. William noticed it immediately. His mentor, usually precise and deliberate, was now sloppy with his strikes, distracted by his heartbreak. Sparks' small-town gossip was already painting Jack's despair as just another piece of the town's endless chatter. William's mind churned. He could not let things continue like this. He liked her, more than he had ever allowed himself to admit. But if he wanted anything with her, if he wanted her to trust him, he could not wait any longer. He had to confess. The thought struck him with the weight of iron in his chest. The story of that night, the riders, Jimmy Bergen, the mercantile, everything. Ida had the right to know before they could ever be serious. And yet, fear held him fast. Could she forgive him? Could she even bear to hear the truth? The hammer fell into the anvil with a loud clang, echoing in the quiet forge. William set it down, chest heaving. The decision pressed against him. He had to find the right moment. Before Sparks turned dangerous again. Before he lost her entirely. Chapter 14, Fire and Truth. The forge smelled of sweat and iron, the day's work echoing in the rhythm of hammer against metal. William wiped his hands on his trousers, trying to steady his nerves. His thoughts kept returning to Ida's invitation, the look in her eyes earlier that day, and the fire building in his chest. Footsteps echoed behind him. He turned. Ida stood in the doorway, hands folded lightly in front of her, a small, teasing smile on her lips. William, she said softly, could I speak with you later tonight? At the mercantile? There's something I'd like to discuss. His chest tightened. Of course, Miss Morel, he said, nodding quickly. She smiled and left, the door clicking softly behind her. Jack, lurking nearby, had overheard. His eyes narrowed into slits. "You'd better not show up tonight," he said, voice low and sharp. "And if you do, you try to convince Ida to marry me. You hear me?" William forced a nod. "Yes, sir," he said, but his jaw tightened, ignoring the order in his mind. After the last bell rang and the forge fell quiet, William moved toward the mercantile. Sparks was hushed in the evening, shadows pooling along the street. Ida met him at the door, and her smile lit the dark street. "I'm glad you came," she said softly. "Me too," William murmured. Without another word she leaned in and kissed him. His hands lifted to her face, her back, drawing her close, and he kissed her back, pouring all his longing and relief into that single moment. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Upstairs." In her apartment, the door closed behind them. The night became theirs. For the first time, William and Ida surrendered fully to the heat of desire, the long weeks of tension and unspoken feelings erupting in their shared embrace. Later, wrapped in the quiet afterglow, William's chest tightened with a different kind of fear. He couldn't keep it inside any longer. "Ida," he began. She lifted her head, sleepy and flushed but alert. "Yes." He swallowed, words tumbling out. I have to tell you everything. About that night, the mercantile, the robbery, my part in it. You deserve to know the truth before anything else." Ida froze, her eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" William sat up, taking her hands in his. "I rode with them. Jimmy Bergen, Walker Flim, they—" He choked slightly, struggling to keep his voice steady. "They killed your family, Ida. I didn't know they would, I swear. I was only along because of my brother Daryl. I had no idea. I couldn't lie to you anymore. I couldn't go on without you knowing." Ida's hands shot away from him. "You what? You knew them? You were there?" Her voice rose, trembling with anger. You let them." "I didn't. I swear I didn't." William pleaded, voice raw. "I tried to stop it, but it was too late. I couldn't do anything. But I had to tell you the truth. I love you, Ida. I love you too much to lie. Please forgive me." Ida's eyes glistened with tears, her chest heaving. I can't believe this. I trusted you." Her voice cracked, caught between fury and heartbreak. "You were with them, while they, my family, my parents and Delia." "I know," he cried, his hands reaching toward her again. "I know. And I can't take it back. I wish with all my heart I could, but I can't. I'm so sorry, Ida. I love you and I couldn't keep it from you. Please, I beg you, don't hate me completely." She stepped back, hand on her forehead, shaking. I don't even know what to think. I hate you, and yet... Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. William swallowed hard, stepping back. "I wish I could take it all back," he said quietly, voice heavy. "But I can't. I love you too much to lie to you anymore." Ida's face twisted with conflicting emotions, fury, hurt, and a flicker of lingering affection all warring in her eyes. She struck his chest lightly, not with violence but with the force of her anguish. "Get out. Now." He nodded silently, heart-shattering. "Yes," he whispered. "I'll go." He left the apartment quietly, the night air cold against his heated skin. Unseen, Jack watched from the shadows across the street, eyes dark and calculating. He had seen William leave the mercantile and knew exactly what the young man would try to do tomorrow. And Jack would be ready. Chapter 15, Firestorm. The morning sun had barely crested the hills when Jack cornered William in the forge. His face was red with anger, fists clenched. "I know what you did last night," Jack hissed, voice low but seething. "You spent the night with her. With Ida. If you don't back off now, I'll tell the whole town. She'll be ruined." William's eyes narrowed, hands tightening on his tools. "You think you can threaten me? You don't even know the half of it," he spat, shoving Jack backward against the wall. Jack stumbled but caught himself, fury burning brighter. "Don't you dare." "I said you don't know." William snapped. Before Jack could respond, he turned and stormed out of the forge, fists clenched, heart racing. William raced up the street toward the rooming house, intent on packing and leaving Sparks. The guilt, the danger, and the heartbreak of Ida's rejection had finally become unbearable. But the streets were suddenly alive with chaos. A rider came screaming toward him, boots pounding on the cobblestones. "Walker Flim. He's escaped prison. He and Jimmy Bergen are coming back. Another man with them. They're coming into Sparks, ready to fire." William's blood ran cold. There was no time to think. No time to run. Sparks was defenseless. He sprinted to the saloon, bursting through the doors. Roger, the owner, looked up, startled. "Roger. Get rifles. Tell the men to arm themselves. Walkers, Bergen and another rider, they're coming and they'll fire on the town. Roger jumped into action, yelling to the regulars. The air filled with shouting and the clatter of weapons being prepared. William grabbed a rifle, checking the loading, his pulse hammering in his ears. The riders came over the ridge, their silhouettes stark against the rising sun. The town erupted into chaos. People screamed, doors slammed and rifles cracked in hurried firing. William steadied his aim. Jimmy Bergen leaned forward, gun raised, firing toward the townsfolk. William's finger tightened on the trigger. He fired. Jimmy fell from his horse, dead, face twisted in shock. But Walker Flynn and the third rider spurred on, escaping the line of fire. William's eyes widened in horror as he realized the third rider, his brother, was Darrell. Darrell? William shouted, heart shattering. No. Without hesitation, he grabbed a nearby horse, spurring it into motion, chasing the fleeing men. The wind tore at his face, the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. Spark streets blurred beneath him, the town behind him now at least partially safe, but the battle far from over. The chase had begun. And for William there was no turning back. Chapter 16. The Cabin. The northern hills were cloaked in mist as William and a handful of Sparks' townsmen approached the isolated cabin. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, betraying the presence of the fugitives inside. Stay here, William whispered to the men, positioning them along the tree-line. I'll talk first. The townsmen nodded, rifles at the ready, anxiety tight in their grips. They had no idea what would happen next. William stomped into the clearing, shouting with authority. I'm coming in. Step aside, Bergen, Flynn, Darrell. We need to talk. The cabin door creaked open, and the three men inside stepped out, hands partially raised. Darrell's eyes met William's, pleading and conflicted. William, come with us. We can leave. No one has to die today, Darrell said, voice tight. William's jaw clenched, anger and betrayal flooding through him. No more, Darrell. I trusted you. I trusted you and you let me down. You let her down. I'm done running. Darrell flinched, stepping back. Jimmy Bergen and Walker Flynn exchanged a glance, smirks replaced by caution. William's hand moved to his rifle. You should have thought of that before the blood was spilled. The first shot rang out. Chaos exploded. Rifles cracked from both sides. Splinters flew from the cabin walls. Smoke filled the air, burning William's eyes, but he kept his focus. A searing pain tore through his shoulder. He stumbled, gritting his teeth against the agony. Still he aimed and fired. One by one Jimmy Bergen, Walker Flynn and, finally, Darrell fell. The echoes of gunfire faded into the northern hills. William collapsed against the cabin wall, the blood from his shoulders soaking through his shirt. Darkness claimed him. When he awoke, the sun was high, warm against his face. Sparks' townsfolk surrounded him in the clearing, faces a mixture of awe and concern. You did it, someone shouted. You saved the town. William, another voice cried. You're a hero. He shook his head, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. No, he said hoarsely. You don't understand. I was there. I was part of it. The mercantile, the robbery, the deaths. I couldn't stop them that night and I rode with them. I need everyone to know the truth. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Shock rippled through Sparks like wind over snow. Then from the crowd a soft clap sounded. William's eyes found her, Ida. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she was smiling, proud. You are a hero, she said, voice firm yet gentle. Even if you made mistakes, you risked everything to protect us. You should not be shunned. William blinked, emotion choking him. He had expected anger, hatred, maybe even exile. Instead, her presence, her understanding, made the weight in his chest just a little lighter. The town murmured, slowly following her lead, clapping and cheering despite their shock. William, battered and bleeding, allowed himself the tiniest relief. For the first time since arriving in Sparks he felt, maybe he could belong. Chapter 17. Healing and Forgiveness. The forge smelled faintly of oil and smoke, but the clamor of hammers had quieted to a gentle rhythm. William sat in a chair beside the window, bandages tight around his shoulder, sunlight warming his pale skin. Roger had patched him up the morning after the cabin fight, though he still winced with every small movement. Sparks was slowly returning to its usual rhythm. People whispered as they passed, their awe of William tempered by the shock of his confession. Some still avoided his eyes, others nodded respectfully. He felt the weight of both judgment and gratitude pressing against him. The door creaked open. William looked up, heart skipping. "William." Ida's voice was soft but steady. She stepped into the room, hands clasped lightly in front of her, her blue dress the same color that had captured his breath weeks ago. He rose slightly, wincing. "Ida," he said, voice raw. She came closer, eyes scanning the bandages. "You're hurt," she said almost accusingly. "But alive. That's what matters. I've been worrying." William swallowed, the lump in his throat heavy. I didn't know if I could face you again after telling the truth." She tilted her head, a faint, understanding smile forming. "I was angry, yes," she said. "But I also saw how much you risked. For me, for the town. I've never doubted your heart, William. Even if you made mistakes." His chest tightened. "I never wanted to hurt you. I loved you too much to lie. I couldn't live with keeping it from you." Ida's hand reached for his, brushing gently against his bandaged shoulder. "I know," she said. "And I forgive you. It doesn't erase what happened, but it means something. It means you chose the right path in the end." William exhaled slowly, relief flooding him. "Ida," his voice trembled. "I love you." Her eyes softened, a quiet tear sliding down her cheek. "I love you too, William. We'll figure out the rest, together." A sudden cough drew their attention. Jack stepped into the room, hands behind his back, face careful but sincere. I wanted to say something," he began, his voice steady. "I've had a lot of anger toward both of you. I understand now. You both did what you had to do and Sparks is still standing because of it. I forgive you. Truly." William blinked, surprised. "Jack." Jack offered a small, wry smile. "I'll admit, I was a fool. You both deserve your happiness. And Sparks deserves to have people like you protecting it." Ida smiled softly at Jack. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." Jack nodded once, then turned to leave. "Just keep each other safe. That's all I ask." William and Ida knew they could do that. Thank you for listening to the love story of William and Ida. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day or night or whatever time you are listening to this. Stay tuned for more stories from Evening Whispers of Love.